Okay, so here we're up to now in Masechta Beitzah. We're up to on Gimel Amud Aleph. Okay, and we had various different uh, interpretations in the Mishnah. Why is a egg that was laid on Yom Tov, why is it prohibited? We had various different interpretations, the different rabbis. One of the suggestions was, one of the rabbis' opinions was that the egg coming from the chicken looks like uh, liquid dripping from a fruit. The liquid is in the fruit and it comes out. The juice from the fruit comes out of the fruit, which seems like the egg coming from the chicken. It seems like fruit juice coming from the fruit, just like juice coming from the fruit is not allowed. And we said before, we explained it's not allowed because you might squeeze it. So the same thing is the egg looks coming from the chicken is like the juice coming from the fruit, and that's why it's usher.
Can I ask you a question?
The Gemara, what?
Can I ask a question? And I sort of forgot you maybe a piece.
Yeah,
So initially we talked about the egg, and it's like on the day after Shabbos, right? It's on a Sunday.
that was one opinion.
So the
That was
other
one interpretation.
opinions, it could be a Wednesday for them.
This interpretation has nothing to do with Shabbos after Yom Tov. This has to do with just Yom Tov itself.
Okay.
Um, the So the Gemara basically is saying now, the Gemara quoted this opinion before um, in the name, who was the rabbi who said that? That's Rabbi Yitzchok. Rabbi Yitzchok said that it's Mashkin Shazovu. So the Gemara basically is saying now that the Af Rabbi Yochanan Savar, also Rabbi Yochanan holds Gezeda Mishumashkin Shazovu. The reason for our Mishnah, what's the problem with the egg that was laid on Yom Tov? It is a Gezeda because of juice that ran from the fruit. Just like we're not allowed to use juice that ran from the fruit, we can't use the egg that came from the chicken. How do we know Rabbi Yochanan holds that? So the Gemara is going to go and say Rabbi Yochanan had a question. From Rabbi Yochanan's question, Rabbi Yochanan's answer, I see, we can tell that he says that the reason why you can't eat the egg on Shabbos is because of that this is a decree because it's like the juice coming from the fruit. That's because otherwise he would not have his question. The Gemara is going to bring down a question that Rabbi Yochanan asked, and when you examine the question that he asked and also the answer that he gave, you'll see that he learns that the prohibition of the egg being laid on Shabbos is because of the gezeda of fruit that liquid as the juice that ran from the fruit. So now, for a minute, we're going to digress and discuss what was the question Rabbi Yochanan asked. The Rabbi Yochanan, Rami, the Rabbi Yehuda, Umeshani. Rabbi Yochanan asked a question from Rabbi Yehuda on Rabbi Yehuda, which means he saw a contradiction between what Rabbi Yehuda said in one place and what Rabbi Yehuda said in the other place. And he answers it. However, from this question and answer that he asked, we can tell that the egg that was laid on Shabbos is usur, is prohibited because of mashkin shezavo. How so? So we got to learn. So let's see what the question he asked. So he said, Tanan, this is the question. He says, we learned in a Mishnah, Ein soichatin asapedes lahoitzi mehen mashkin. Okay, that means that you're not allowed to squeeze fruit to extract the juice. You can't squeeze fruit on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. This is a Shabbos, actually. Same thing. Can't squeeze fruit to extract the juice. What happens in Yotzu Ma'atzmo? What happens if the juice came out on their own? You didn't squeeze it, it just came out. Can you use juice that comes from a fruit on Shabbos? That Shabbos, can you use it? You didn't squeeze it, but it came out on its own. So the Mishnah says, the Tanakama says, asurim, prohibited. Juice that comes out on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that would be prohibited by itself. Now, they're not prohibited forever, just for that day. Rashi says, V'im yotzu ma'atzmon asurim. So Rashi, boy boy, for that day, Gezeira shemo yischei. Because we worry that you might come to squeeze. If you're going to use juice that was squeezed on its own or it came out on its own, you might come to squeeze. So therefore, you can't use on that Shabbos any, whether you squeeze it, for sure not. You're not allowed to squeeze it. Even if it comes out on its own, you're not allowed to use it because if you're going to use it, you might come to squeeze. Rabbi Yehuda says it depends. He says it depends if the person is happy with the juice of the fruit that came out. That would make the difference whether it's prohibited or permissible. People sometimes store fruit because they want to eat the fruit. In a case where they store the fruit to eat them, they're not interested in the juice coming out of the fruit because they want the fruit to be as juicy as possible. They want to eat the juicy fruit. So they want the liquid to stay in the fruit. So if, let's say, for example, you have an orange, which you want to eat, let's say an apple or something that can run. If you want to eat it, if it's stored for eating it, and you're not happy that the juice came out, so then you can use the juice because we're not worried that you're going to come to squeeze, because you don't want to squeeze, because these are fruits that are meant for eating and they're not meant for squeezing. So in that case, you could use the juice that came out on its own. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Im le'oichlin, if he's storing them as food to eat them, not for juice, so then hayoytze mehen mutar, that which comes out on its own from them is permissible. Zok Rashi, Im le'oichlim hey muchonosim aperis halalu, if these fruits are stored, they've been brought in to eat, they're sitting there for eating. So then so what comes out is permissible on the day. The kiv on the loy nichalei bahani mashkin likol lemigzer shema. Since the person isn't happy with this liquid, he stored them to eat. So we're not worried if you're going to drink what came out on its own. We don't worry that you might come to squeeze. However, v'im lemashkin, if you're storing the fruit because you want to squeeze them eventually, then hayitzamem also. Then what comes out is prohibited because you're going to use it now, you might come to squeeze because you're that's what the fruit are there destined, they're destined to be squeezed, so we worry about that. So then it's us. So therefore, what do we see over here? Uh, that only if it's meant for drinking does it have a status of prohibition that you might, if it's meant for eating. So what do you look at the juice that came out? You don't say, well, oh, here it came out. You might, this is food, the food that came out. So you see very clearly that food that comes out from another food. So in this case, the juice is standing to be eaten, let's say, right? But it's a liquid, but it's a liquid that's going to be eaten. The fact that it came out and now it's here, you don't consider this to be a liquid that came out. I mean, you can imagine that egg is not a liquid at all. And so if they don't consider the juice of a fruit that is standing to eat, the juice is not considered liquid just because the fruit is standing there to eat. So an egg that comes from the chicken is certainly standing there to eat, correct? So let's look at Alma. So what do we see? But that's his question. I'm just bringing it out. What he's asking on Rav Yehuda, he's asking. So you see that Kol Eichlin the Rav Yehuda, if it's food, because he's saying if the apple was food, an apple that is food, and you have something coming from it, even though it's juice, but it's not really juice because it's standing there to eat. Uchla de afrasu. It's food that has been separated. You have the fruit itself, and the juice is part of the food that has been separated from the fruit itself. It's all food. And we don't say, according to Rabbi Yehuda, oh, this is like liquid that has run. No, this is not liquid. Mi de Omar, since he says, im la'oichlin, hayotze mehen mutar, since he says that if it is meant for eating, then what comes of them is permissible, meaning the juice is permissible. So we see, kol la'oichlin, anything which is there for food. Amar bedover hayotze mehem. So he says, anything that comes out from a food, uchla de afrasu, that's food that has been separated. That's not included in the decree of liquid that has been run. That's not liquid that is run. That's considered a food now. And that's why it's okay to eat it on Yom Tov, on Shabbos. In that case, so he asked the question. This is what we see in Rabbi Yehuda. But I'll ask you a question. Rabbi Yehuda further said, here, this is an issue about the 2 days Rosh Hashanah, which we know also today. Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days is Yom Arichta Dameh. It is a long day, which means there's two opinions over here in the Gemara. Actually, Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's not 1 day. It's 2 separate days. Rosh Hashanah, because they had issue, they didn't know whether it's going to be Rosh Hashanah or not. So sometimes they made it into 2 days, Rosh Hashanah. But there's 2 ways to look. What does it mean 2 days? 2 days meaning it's 48 hours. Started is 2 day a 2 day Rosh Hashanah, which means a Yom Tov of 48 hours, or is it 24 hours and we're not sure which one of the 24, so we're keeping them both. What difference does it make? In other words, do we look at it that you can make a condition and say, well, the first day might be Yom Tov, or the second day might be Yom Tov. There's only one of them Yom Tov. Or we say, no, it's a one long Yom Tov. It's not either or. And that would make a difference like, with regards to halacha. So the first halacha that he talks about, it says, V'oid Amar Rabbi Yehuda. And this is another thing that Rabbi Yehuda said over there. So Rashi brings down, what is the halacha that says, Le'il minei tanan b'meseches eruvin. We learned before in Masechta Eruvin, it says over there, Rosh Hashanah shehoyoyorei shemot tisaber. Rosh Hashanah is coming up, and he was worried that it may be a second day. If the witnesses don't come the first day, so it's going to become a Iber. It's going to become a full year, and the Rosh Hashanah is going to be the next day. So what's going to happen? And then you're going to be 2 Yom Tovs. You're going to have the first day Yom Tov that you weren't sure. So you kept it Yom Tov, and then you find out that there's the next day Yom Tov. So the person has a need to go in different places, or in this case is not going there. So the Mishnah over there talks over there. That's not the other case. That's the first case. We're saying, Oidam Rabbi Yehuda. So the first case over there, the Gemara says, you can make 2 Erevs. An Erev means an Erev Techumim. So you could make an Erev on the first day, Yom Tov, you could make. And you can also make an Erev on the second day, Yom Tov. So let's say you didn't make an Erev before Yom Tov. Yom Tov itself, you shouldn't really make the Erev. But he says, on the 2 days Yom Tov, you can make an Erev both on the first and the second day Yom Tov. And you say like this, if the first day is Yom Tov, okay, so then that means that the second day doesn't need an Erev because it's a weekday, right? And therefore, you can go on the second day wherever you want. You can go, there's no Tchumim over there, right? If, on the other hand, the first day is a weekday, and the second day the Yom Tov, so you made now an Erev, so you can go from that Erev another 2,000 Amas further from where the Erev is. The Erev allows you to go further. The problem is he didn't make an Erev before Yom Tov. So now he makes 2 Erevs. He makes 1 Erev he makes on the first day Yom Tov. He's only going to walk on the second day Yom Tov he wants to walk. But he makes the Erev on the first day Yom Tov. And he says, well, if today is Yom Tov, then tomorrow I don't need an Erev. I can just walk anywhere I want.
If today's Yom Tov, he shouldn't
what?
be making build. But if today's Yom Tov, he shouldn't be building an Erev.
True. So the Erev is worthless. We don't need it.
No.
Here an Erev is not talking about building anything.
It's not a malacha.
We're talking about placing a piece of bread. I think that's what it's talking. I think it's talking about the Tchum Shabbos over there. In Erev, talking about Tchum Shabbos, you wanted to be able to walk further out the next day. He's trying to walk the second day Yom Tov further out. So if the first day is Yom Tov, he doesn't even need an Erev for the second day. So if it's a weekday, then he makes the Erev, then the Erev will work. And if it's not Yom Tov, then he doesn't need an Erev. Then he makes the next day an Erev. Because if the first day was Yom Tov, that Erev didn't work. Right? If the first day was Yom Tov, Okay, Shtei Kedushas saying, he said there's two Kedushas, which means the first and the second days are two separate days. It's not one long 48 days. Echad Choil, Echad Yontiv. One of them is weekday, Echad Yontiv. But V'lo Yadinon, we don't know, Hey Choil, Hey Yontiv. We don't know which one is the weekday, which is the Yontiv. So if you make both an Erev on both days, so one of the days is a weekday. So therefore, it'll be okay. I guess to walk, I have to look up the Gemara there. I'm not sure what it is talking about. It to walk on both days. I got to look up the Gemara there. But the second halacha, what's brought down over here, the person has masna odom al kalkola shel peiris b'yom tov rishon. So the person has a basket of fruit that he has not yet separated the tithe. You can't use it. And you're not supposed to tithe on Yom Tov. So the person goes and makes about this fruit of Paris on the first day Yom Tov. Dr. Rashi, Masna Odom al Hakalkola, Lahom Milsa Havish Kedushas. For this aspect, for this fact, for this thing, it's two separate holdings. So he explains. Hoy Saloy Kalkola Shel Paris Tevel. He had a basket of fruit that are tevel. V'shochach v'le'iser me'erev Yom Tov. Forgot. He did not make meiser from Erev Yom Tov. Utnan, and we learned in the Mishnah, ein magbihin trumas meiseris b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to raise, you're not allowed to give trumas meiser b'Yom Tov. So what does he do? He has a basket of fruit, and he hasn't given the meiser yet. He wants to eat the fruit on Yom Tov. What should he do? So he says like this, meiser b'Yom Tov b'tanai. So then he gives a tithe and he makes a condition on Yom Tov. He says like this: Im hayoim choil u'lemachar kodesh. If today is weekdays and tomorrow is Yom Tov, yiu elu trumas u'maisres alelu. So he takes the tithing that he does. He takes the fruit. He says that what I'm raising now, if today is choil, this is a tithing for the rest of the fruit. And then he goes and he says, "V'ima yom kodesh." But if today is holy, ein b'dvarei klum. So what I said means nothing. I said I'm making a tithing. The tithing doesn't help. You can't make tithing on Shabbos and Yom Tov. I don't want to. I'm not doing it on Yom Tov. I'm not tithing. V'noisu b'hem siman. He gives a siman in those fruit that he used as a tithing to know. Okay, now they're either tithed or not, but ulamachar chayzer v'emerkein. And tomorrow he goes back and says the same thing. Im hayom choil ve'esmel kodesh. If today is weekday and yesterday was the holy day, you elu trum al hashar. There should be trum on the others. Im hayom kodesh, but if today is kodesh ve'esmel choil, harei nasa truma metmel is become truma from the day before. And either way, they were fixed. Either way, because he's given truma, he's given the meiser. One day that he gave it was a weekday because they're not both. That's why he says that there's one weekday and one, even though we keep 2 days Yom Tov, but they're two Yom Tov, not one long Yom Tov. They're two separate Yom Tovs. And therefore, I could technically tithe on both days, and one of them works. The weekday works, and on the second day, I can eat it. So they have been fixed for the second day. Can't eat in the first day because you're not sure that you can give tithing then, because it may be Yom Tov then. But if you do it on the first and the second day, Either way, it's become done. It's done on a weekday. Either the first day is a weekday or the second day. V'oichlo b'sheni. But you can eat it on the second day. And Rashi says, v'oichlo b'sheni, avaloi b'rishon, but you can't eat it on the first day. The Shema Koideshu, because the first day may be Koidesh, of Klum, and by saying Meiser doesn't mean anything, because you're not allowed to be Meiser it on the first day. But once it comes to the second day, even if what you said in the second day doesn't mean anything, but you already did it in the first day. And if the first day is Kodesh, then the second day you can do it. So either way, you're Mesakin. And V'chein, and the same thing is true, he said, with Beitzah Shenel do Berishon, Toichal B'Sheni. The egg that was laid on the first day Yontiv, you can eat on the second day. V'chein legabe Beitzah zokt Rashi, Havish te Kedushas. It's also considered two Kedushas, two separate holiness. Ha'echad choil, one of them is a weekday, one Rosh Hashanah is weekday. V'echad Yontiv. So Vanel do Berishon muteres b'sheni. If it's laid on the first day, it is permitted in the second day. Because even though you're not allowed to eat an egg that is laid on Yontiv, but by the second day, if it was Yontiv the first day, the second day is no longer Yontiv. You can eat it. And if the second day is Yontiv, then it was laid on a weekday. So it's not a problem. Either way, you can eat an egg that was laid on the first day Yontiv, you can eat in the second day Yontiv. So Rabbi Yochanan asks, B'sheni ein b'rishon loy. You can only eat it on the second day Yontiv, but you cannot eat it on the first day Yontiv. Why can't you eat it on the first day Yontiv? Almo, b'sheni ein b'rishon loy. The second day, and not on the first one. Why can't you eat it on the first one? Why would the egg be prohibited, according to Rabbi Yehuda? Almo, so we see that kol midi dezov mimekoymei, even an egg, since it ran from its place, it was in the chicken, and now it's outside the chicken. Even though its food is asur. Before, Rabbi Yehuda said that if it was meant for food, the liquid remains food, and you can eat it because it's food from food is separate. But here, the egg, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow to eat it. Alma, that anything that is runs on Yantiv, it's even though it's ochla, it's awesome. So that's the question that he's asking on the Rabbi Yehuda, whether food that comes from another food is still prohibited. Before, Rabbi Yehuda says that food that comes from fruit is not prohibited. That's why if the fruit is standing to be eaten, that liquid would be okay. And by the Beitzah, he doesn't allow you to eat it on Yontiv, because even though it's a food from a food. And what does Rabbi Yochanan answer? Shan Rabbi Yochanan muchlafes hashita. So he says that we have to change around the view of the Mishnah. The first Mishnah we brought down. So over there, the way we learned it, that Rabbi Yehuda says that food is okay. It's not considered. We have to change it around. That Rabbi Yehuda is the one, like the Tanna Kama, that the Tanna Kama is the one that holds that if it's for food, that it's okay. So you have to switch around. Shitas Shani Rabbi Yochanan, Muchlefes HaShita. Shitas HaMishnah de Ein Seuchtim. The view of the Mishnah that says that you can't squeeze you have to switch around the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with the Chachamim, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Yutake cannot squeeze. I mean, you cannot eat the juice, even if it was meant for eating, you still cannot eat the juice. It's still considered, because just like he says, by the egg. So we switch it around, that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that holds that you're not allowed to eat either, and the Chachamim allow it. So the answer, the Rabbi Yehuda l'Rabbanan. We turn around Rabbi Yehuda for the Rabbanan. We turn around the opinion. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's answer. So that means that according to Rabbi Yehuda, an egg is osur, that is laid. The Chachamim Taka will hold an egg is not osur. That's what the Gemara answers. So there shouldn't be a contradiction from Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, since the fact that Rabbi Yochanan is asking a question, why is the egg osur, right? It means that Rabbi Yochanan learns that the egg is osur because of it's considered like a liquid that has run. Because otherwise, what if the egg is a totally different reasoning? Why would there be a question that Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda is talking about, in the case, about liquid that has run, and he's asking a question on an egg that was laid. If the reasoning from an egg that is laid has nothing to do with liquid that was run, why is he asking a question from the egg on the what Rabbi Yehuda holds by liquid that was run? There's two separate. The reasoning for an egg is a different reasoning. Maybe it's Perish Shenoshru, maybe it's Achona Derab. I don't know. There's different reasons. Since Rabbi Yochanan is asking from this, Rabbi Yochanan, Mimashkin Shuzovu, Beitzah, he's asking a question, a contradiction from liquid that has run and on the egg on one another. How come Rabbi Yehuda prohibits? What was his question? How come Rabbi Yehuda permits? How come Rabbi Yehuda permits? How come Rabbi Yehuda permits? How come Rabbi Yehuda permits liquid if it's standing for food? And why does he prohibit the egg? But if the prohibition of the egg is not because of liquid that has run, so what's the question? It has another reason why it's asur. Shmami no chad taimuhu. That means that this is one reason. Uman the osar beho, the one that prohibits liquid that has run, osar beho, prohibits the egg that was laid on Shabbos, on Yom Shabbos. With the shori beho, the one that permits in the case that it runs, it's okay, is also going to permit by the egg. So the egg and the mashkin shazovu are aligned, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda is asking the question, the contradiction. So that means that Rabbi Yochanan, who asked the question, holds that they're both the same reason. Following or not? Is that what he said here? Because otherwise, if the egg that was laid on Shabbos has a different reason, then Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't ask from the egg on the case of the liquid that has run, because it's a different story. It's a different prohibition. Anyways, that's the proof here. But in the meantime, how are we going to answer the contradiction? So Rabbi Yochanan comes up with he says, well, change the opinions. What it's written in the Mishnah is not really what the opinions is. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to eat an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, and you're not allowed to drink the liquid that came out by itself. And that's his opinion, Rabbi Yehuda. We have to change it around. In the Mishnah is said differently that he does allow. We have to change around the Mishnah. That's the answer Rabbi Yochanan gave. But Ravina Amar Loilum Loitipach. He does. That's not such a good answer to change around because you have a contradiction. Just change. Say, well, they said something else. He says, no, we don't have to change around the opinion. Ravina Amar Hodek Amar Rabbi Yochanan Muchlefes Hashita. This that Rabbi Yochanan says that you have to change around the view. He says, Loitipach, don't turn around. But Rabbi Yehuda, the Divreim de Rabbono Kamarlu. And Rabbi Yehuda was basically saying according to the words of the Rabbanon. In other words, he himself Taka disagrees. But what you read in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that the egg that was laid on the first day Yontif, that it's that it would be osur on the first day Yontif. It seems like the egg that was laid on Rosh Hashanah on the first day would be osur, even though it's a food. That's not really his opinion, but Rabbi Yehuda is saying this according to the Rabbanah. He's saying to them, according to me, he allows it in any event. He doesn't have a problem with an egg that is laid on Yontif, because just like he allows the juice that came out from the fruit on Yontif, that's okay. He allows the egg also. But he's saying, according to the Rabbanah, Rabbi Yehuda L'Divrei the Rabbanah Kamarlu. He's saying them according to your words. Lididi, according to my opinion, afilu berishoy nami sharia. Even on the first day, you're allowed to eat it. Why? Duchla afresu. This is a food that has been separated. Just Rabbi Yehuda says, just like I allow the fruit that has run from on its own, from fruit, the juice that has run from the fruit, if the fruit is standing to eat, I allow to eat, to drink, to use that juice. I also allow the egg to eat in the first day. So, according to me, even on the first day is allowed. The uchla the afrosu, because this is a food that has been separated. Uchla the afrosu, zok Rashi, v'kivan du mishum schita les leko. And since there is no schita here, which means if you're going to squeeze those fruit that are there for food, that's not called schita. So since there is no schita, so if it's there to be eaten, there's no schita, and therefore there's no problem with that egg either. Food is not a problem. And therefore, by me, you can eat it on the first day Yom Tov as well. But according to your opinion, you prohibit it also on the second day, because the Chachamim say that it's one long day, and we can't even eat it on the second day. But he was arguing to the Chachamim, you prohibited it also on the second day. Nihi nami di islachu bebeitzah. So let it be that you hold by the egg that gzeidas mashkin shezovu. You worry, you make a gzeida because mashkin shezovu. Even if it's a chicken which is there to be eaten, so it's still a prohibition, which means there's no muktzah over there. It's tarnagos meslachila, but you're saying this is just like liquid that has run and you want to prohibit it. But oidulimias de b'sheni sharia. I want you at least admit to me that on the second day Yom Tov you should be allowing it. Why? Because one of them is weekdays. There's two separate kedushas. one day is kedusha and the second day is kedusha. Rabban says loy. They said no. Kedusha achas. It's one kedusha, and you can't eat the egg that was laid on the first day Yom Tov on the second day. Kedusha achasi. And he explains, V'loi domi l'shari yomim tov. This is not compared to other Yom Tovs. The hanach lav mishum sveika askum. This have not been instituted because of a suffix. 2 days Rosh Hashanah was not because we don't know which day is Rosh Hashanah. The av bizman bezdin or yoisim shnei yomim. Also, in the time of Bezdin, they would make him 2 days. Imbo edim and mincha l'maylav. The witnesses came after mincha. The mincha and avkid amrim b'resharim flamadam beis. So they made it into a yontiv. So basically, the Rabbanan decreed 2 days yontiv then, made an extra yontiv, not because of a sveik the yom. And because of that, Rosh Hashanah is considered one long day. That's the opinion of the Chacham. So the way he answers the contradiction, the way Ravina answered the contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda, he says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the truth is you're allowed to eat a tanagal on the first day Yom Tov as well on Rosh Hashanah. The egg you're allowed to eat on the first day Yom Tov. When the argument that Rabbi Yehuda is having, he's saying even according to you, Rabban, because according to me, he says I'm not worried about eating an egg on Yom Tov. Why? Uchla afrasu. If it's standing for food, as the Tanagelos, the other thing that comes from it does not have the decree of Mashkin Shazovu. It's not considered like liquid that is run. But according to you, he's arguing to them. At least admit to me, he says, that on the second day you can eat it. They said no. They said that it's Kedusha Achasi. The Chacham say this is one Kedusha. Normally, why we have today like a second day Yom Tov, because we weren't sure which day is Yom Tov. It was one or the other. But over there, it wasn't one or the other. Over there, they were both actually Yom Tov because the Chachamim extended the Yom Tov because of there was a problem over there. They made a mistake in the song, so they extended it. So they basically said it's a 48-day Yom Tov, so you can't eat the egg that was laid on the first day Yom Tov on the second day Yom Tov. That's how Ravina, that's how Ravina answers the question.
So he wouldn't be able to do the whole issue about tchum.
Sorry?
The whole issue about a tchum would also
okay.
go
That would be the same principle. It's 1 or 2 days would apply into either of the other cases.
Okay.
Let me take a look for 1 second over here. Let me take a look 1 second. Right. Just for the Mishnah over there, clarity, the Mishnah talks about over there Yom Tov and Shabbos. See this so Yom Tov and Shabbos, so a person can make 2 Erevs, and he says the first Erev is to the east, and the second Erev is to the west. Or vice versa. I guess what happens here I'm looking for the Rashi here. Where's the Rashi? So it says, so Rosh Hashanah Sheyor Shemet Isaber. So you make 2 Erevs. So basically, over here, he makes 2 Erevs, one for the first day Yontiv and one for the second day Yontiv. Let's say on the first day Yontiv he wants to go to one direction, and the second day Yontiv wants to go another direction. So you're not going to say, well, you can only have one direction extra because it's one day. If we say that it's one day, then you can only go in one direction. Why? Because it's one long yontif. So whatever direction you get, you can't give yourself two Erevs. But if it's 2 days yontif, then you can give two separate Erevs. So let's say you put the first day, let's say you want to go in one direction further, and the second day yontif, you want to go in the other direction further. So if it's one yontif, you can't do that because you have to go because it's one yontif. Where is your resting place? This area or the other? You can't have it both ways. But if we say that it's two separate yontifs, then the first day yontif, this is my resting place. Because if it's a weekday, I don't need an Erev. I can just go there, right? And then it's not an Erev. Then the second day is an Erev. If the first day is the holiday, so then the next day I don't need an Erev. I can go. So therefore, that's what he's saying over there, and this fits in with this whole idea of 1 or 2 day yontifs. Okay. So okay, so that's the other way the Gemara answered the contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. He gives a totally different answer. Ravina Bereid Ravula. Ravina Bereid Ravula Amar. He says that there's another reason over here. Ravina Omar. He says Rabbi Yehuda may call it leitikshir. It's not a question b'chlal. He challenges Rabbi Yochanan's. He disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. We proved that Rabbi Yochanan says he believed that Rabbi Yochanan believed that the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is because of mashkin shazova. That's why you can't eat an egg that was laid on Yontif. But he says it's not even a problem in the first place. Why? The Hodik Omar b'sheni ein berishin loi. The reason why he doesn't allow on the first day, only in the second day, Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't allow to eat the egg. He says not a problem because he's talking about Bamedus Lebeitzim Komar. He says that the chicken is not there to be eaten, so it wasn't prepared because it's standing there to lay eggs. And therefore, muktzah. That's why it's muktzah, because you didn't know about it from before Yom Tov, and therefore your mind wasn't on it. You can't use it on Yom Tov because it's been not prepared for Yom Tov. It's muktzah, separated. Below mishum mashkin shazovu, not mashkin shazovu. So let's see what the Gemara says. So he says, "Hocha betarnegoilas hoyemedes." We're talking about a chicken that is there to raise the eggs. But Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda goes according to his reasoning. He holds muktzah. The reason why we can't eat the egg on the first day, nothing with mashkin shazavu. That has to do because it's muktzah, because you didn't know the egg was there, so it wasn't prepared. An egg that wasn't there, you can't prepare it. And Rabbi Yehuda goes according to his reasoning. He holds by muktzah. So that's the reason. So it's not a problem that he allows the fruit from the juice from the fruit, because that's mashkin, that's oichel. But here there's another isser. The isser is muktzah. The Gemara meisivi. So here the Gemara is going to ask now another question, going back to the earlier opinions that the Gemara asked before. We're going back to the interpretation of why an egg that was laid in Yom Tov is prohibited. And the Gemara is going to challenge it from this Mishnah, that question. But But since we're going into a whole new subject over here, so why don't we leave it over here today? And we'll pick up from here the next time when we learn the Mitzvah Shem next week. In the meantime, let's hope and pray that it will be peace and safety in Eretz Yisrael, and we should hear only good news. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for having us.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You too.